So this is the pocket on a liner for an evening bag. This bag should be able to basically hold some cards and your phone. Your cards can go in here. It's oversized, so you could probably slide 3, 4, maybe 5 cards in there. This is the liner. This is the pocket. The pocket's glued down, and I've made my line. You probably can't see, but with a wing divider at about 2 mil. Um, I'm going to work through all of this with a pricking iron and a hammer, and then I'm gonna hand stitch it. You will probably never see the stitching on this, and it's still gonna take me a whole heap of time, but it'll look a little better and it'll last a little longer, so I think it's worth it. So remember, some thread, like what we use, comes unwaxed. We have to wax it to make sure that it stays durable and it stitches really nicely. This is just for a couple inches inside on the liner to hold the pocket in place. But you really want to make sure that it's perfect, because I would imagine you'd probably prefer if it was perfect, right? You'd probably want something better instead of something worse. So we're going to go through the work just to make it a little nicer, a little bit nicer. I think that's the best way to do it. So now we're stitching the pocket. We are using 70 centimeters of thread. It's important to kind of get an idea of how much thread you need for each thing. You just write on the pattern piece, makes life a lot easier. Working with, like this is a calfskin on a micro suede liner. Working with soft leather and soft materials is really annoying because it never sits quite where you want it to, right? It's kind of unproductive and you gotta fidget with it. Like there's a reason we don't do textiles usually. We really don't like working with like cloth or anything like that because it's just all over the place. Like leather, you know what you have, where it is, where it sits. But when you get to really, really soft stuff, it can get a little bit, I don't know, a little challenging. But for a bag like this that we need to end up inverting, you absolutely have no choice. So after a bit of tinkering, we've got rivets and our magnet, and then we're gonna turn that, and that's gonna give us magnet on the inside and our tabs for our chain, and then you won't see any of the hardware. And all of it is between our outer and our liner, so it's all reinforced. If you just had just your outer leather, eventually these could tear through, or if you got the chain caught on like a door handle or something, which is probably gonna happen at some point, it might just rip the rivets out. So we're trying to always engineer our stuff to last. So what we're doing now is we're gonna try and punch across this line. The tricky part is there's a magnet here that we can see on the back. I need to make sure that I'm on the line here and I don't end up too low, and I need to make sure I don't hit the magnet and break everything. I'm not going to punch through the back because if this is off by like a quarter or half a mil, you'll notice it on the front. It makes such a staggering difference, but it'll make the whole thing look bad. So I've measured out and kind of embossed by leaning into the pricking iron to make my line here. And if everything goes smooth, I'll have pricked through here, leaving a centimeter of lag on each side, and it will go right across here as well, and it'll look really, really good. If it goes poorly, I'll end up like breaking through the seam here, or I'll hit the magnet and break my pricking iron, and then you won't see any more posts of this because I'll be furious and I'll throw it in the trash. Okay, so I suspect that the holes turned out pretty good. I didn't break through the lower part of the turned edge, and everything seemed like it went pretty smooth. Thing is, you don't really know until they're stitched. When you're working with a metallic like this, it's really hard to see anything. Like obviously, right, there's a lot of distortion, a lot of reflection. Most metallics are pebbled like this is. Very few of them are actually smooth because if they scuff, it really shows and it kind of kills the illusion really. I think this went okay, but I won't know until I've completed the stitching, and then I have to do the same thing again on the other side. Okay, so the stitching is done, and this is really nice. This turned out fantastic. This is very even. Our inside looks good too. This was obviously the primary concern, is between the magnet and like the lower lip of the turned edge. You really don't want to mess it up. This turned out really good. So I'm just going to use the same technique on the other one where I measure, I think it was like 2.1 centimeters, 2.1 centimeters, try and measure the same here, but it's a little tough because of the bulge from the magnet, and then score it with an awl and stitch across it. This was a success though, I like it. So I've probably spent the better part of like 3 hours thinking about all the ways I could approach this stitch, because this is kind of a development unit for the evening bag. How to get this really, really straight. Because if it's off by like a mil or half a mil, you'll notice and it looks really, really bad. So why stitch this at all? The reason it stitches is because this is just this turned over and held with glue, right? And that's great and good and all. But this is a magnet clasp, and over time it'll pull and pull and pull and pull, and eventually the glue will fail, and then your whole bag's kind of failed, and it's not great. We really want these to last, so we're going to go through the trouble to make sure it's stitched down properly. And we don't machine stitch it because it just, I don't know, it looks worse. We don't like it. Let's do it properly, right? If you're going to have this forever, it must be done right. It's a lot of effort, but it's worth it, and we really want to make sure this lasts as long as you could ever need it for. So last note on the hand stitching here, now that it's tapped down and it looks good. Hand stitching looks really pretty, and it has the slant, and that's all great and good and all too, but each stitch is its own little knot, okay? Each stitch, if one of these was to pop, and this is a high wear area, right? Because it pulls so much. If one of these was to break, each stitch here is its own little knot, and it won't fray and it won't unravel. You could probably just glue the broken thread and tuck it back in, and it would look very close to good as new. On a repair, I could easily rip these out and just restitch them too. So there's a lot of versatility with that. With machine stitching, when it starts to unravel, it just pulls and pulls and frays and wears, and you keep trimming the thread, and it just gives out more and more. But with saddle stitching, each thread will hold the next thread, right? It stays together, and just makes it last longer. So the next set of holes went pretty smooth after a lot of measuring and deliberating. But we won't really know until it's stitched up. So that's the next step for this. And after this, I'm going to have to glue it all together. Face to face, stitch it and invert it. There's a lot to be said for making something and then having to like glue the nice part of it or just whack some holes through it. There's a lot to be said for just trusting the process of how this all works. So the next step is going to be preparing the holes for stitching with a pricking iron. The one difficult thing about this is going to be that with the suede lining, I can't scratch with the wing divider here. So pretty much every time I'm about to punch through, I have to kind of take it and measure out for each hit to make sure I'm on the right track. That's going to be pretty annoying, but that's kind of all it is. Just, we can't really do a whole lot about that. First punch is complete, so holy cow, now I gotta work my way down and hopefully keep everything lined up really well. I'd love to just eyeball it, but we're using 2.5 mil over 2 mil, and 2 mil you can kind of eyeball, 2.5 I can mess with you a little bit sometimes. So we're on the home stretch, just stitching the bag together before we invert it. Little tricky stitching when you've poked holes into any black material because you can't see where they are, but if you're really cognizant of your stitching iron size, you can just kind of feel about and guess, and you'll actually get through it pretty quickly. Our stitches have a little less tilt than usual just because we're dealing with kind of a micro suede to micro suede. The harder your leather is, the more stable and secure it is, the more tilt you can get into your stitch. Stuff like this, a little less aesthetic, but extremely durable. Okay, stitching went pretty well, so now we'll hit it with a hammer, as you should. We We do this just to tap the stitches flat so they don't wear so much. It also helps them really shape up and give an even look. And you want to use a polished hammer. This hammer has wax on it from the thread, but it is mirror finished. I polished it by hand. If you don't and you just take a claw hammer out of your garage, you'll ruin your leather. It'll scuff it, it'll rip, it'll tear. So make sure you're using the proper hammer for that. Okay, lastly is to invert the bag, which it's never the most romantic part of the process because you just kind of you gotta put some force in it sometimes and hope that everything doesn't get absolutely mangled. For a build like this, you want to be using soft leather, just because it helps the format more, like to get your phone in and out and all that, but also for the inevitable inversion of the piece. You can invert harder leather, sort of, but you'll just destroy it in the process. It'll look really shitty after. We're pretty much there, though. Actually, we'll just take our hammer. You want to pry the edges a little bit, too. It'll take a little bit more kind of finessing and working out to get it quite right. This is a bone folder. Typically, you just use it to help, I don't know, push things, pull your pricking irons out, stuff like that. But you can also use it. My hands are just slightly too big to get in this. It's super close, but not quite. So it can take a while to work an inversion. There's not really any nice way to do it, but you want to make sure that you get your corners. Like this corner's kind of pulled in and looks stupid. So you want to spend a lot of time getting that just right. Well, let's pretend I got it the whole way. This is more or less what we're working with. I'll finish it up a little bit more, throw a chain on it, and then we'll take a good look at it. Okay, we're done fumbling about. We're going to throw a chain on here. And here we go. This is our evening bag. So big enough to fit your phone and a couple cards for a night out. All hand stitched, all excellent leather. With a magnet closure at the top. And you can see there's a little pocket on the inside for your credit cards and stuff. It's oversized, so you can fit multiple into the same pocket. This turned out really nice. I'm really happy with this. This was about the second go at this to develop the pattern. I'll just try and fit a few different sizes of people's phones in here and make sure that it all works out. But I really like it. It should fit pretty much the largest that you could find. So these should be available on the site right away, and we'll be doing a bunch more variants of them. I believe a white deerskin one will be coming up next.